When the Asgard from Anvil Aerospace was unveiled during the recent Invictus launch week, I was really only expecting it to be just another dropship. I've owned the Valkyrie before, and though I really enjoyed its form factor and the idea behind it, I just couldn't convince myself that it was worth keeping around, so I melted it in favor of something else. And naturally, I, as many players probably did, grouped the Asgard in as nothing more than a Valk variant. Most of us even probably expected it to be priced at or above the same price point as the Valkyrie. So during Invictus, I didn't pull the trigger on getting one. Several of my org mates, however, did. And for the past couple weeks, they just couldn't stop talking about how good it was. Now, I had some store credit laying around, so I decided to pick one up, and as it turns out, my original preconceptions about it were, for the most part, wrong. In this video, I'm going to be doing a full review of the Asgard, including a brief ship tour, as well as touching on numerous aspects of it that may make it one of the better choices as a medium-sized daily driver for many a Star Citizen. That's up next. Welcome back everyone to Forge Core Gaming. I'm your host Phoenix, and this is my review of the Asgard from Anvil Aerospace. I'll be leaving chapter markers in the description and pinned comment. So if you want to skip certain sections or jump to parts of the video that you'd like to rewatch, those are the two places you can do so. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We're still very much a growing channel, and any likes, subscribes, and comments go a really long way in helping us continue to make great content like the video you're watching. Also, if you'd like to join in on going the extra mile in supporting the channel, Forge Core memberships are a really great way that you can make a huge contribution on my journey to becoming a full-time content creator. If you decide to become a channel member, you'll automatically receive 5 times the entries anytime I do ship giveaways. Please be aware that 100% of my content will always be free to watch, so it's completely optional. Now without further ado, let's get into it. First off, what else is there to say about the design of the Asgard other than, wow. This is one of the few ships in the verse that from every single angle, it looks good. From its imposing frontal view to the aggressive thruster configuration with 4 of the giant primary thrusters being VTOL capable, down to the sleek, overlapping armored panels that Anvil Aerospace is well known for. The Asgard just oozes military prowess. It's one of those ships that, from a visual standpoint, you just don't want to look away from it. Now this doesn't come as any surprise, as it shares a chassis with the Valkyrie, so those good looks are, in a sense, hereditary. But the Asgard kicks it up a notch in the realm of visuals by front-loading a full arsenal of guns and missiles on the forward half of the ship, just screaming to everything in its path, "You'd better get out of the way." When we want to enter the ship, we have 3 methods of ingress. One being the large hangar door positioned in the rear, as well as 2 possible entries by way of step and side door on both the port and starboard sides of the ship, just underneath the mid-body wing. Upon entering, we're met with an impressively large cargo/hangar bay, which, though it doesn't hold the absolute most cargo in the game, at 180 SCU of official cargo capacity, it does boast the ability to carry the largest land vehicles in the verse due to its width and height. Or it can carry multiple smaller vehicles, including some snub-sized craft, making it, I believe, the smallest pocket carrier in the game thus far. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. The next smallest ship capable of such a claim would likely be in the Constellation family of ships, and those are roughly 15 meters longer at the smallest, so this is impressive. Additionally, when carrying smaller land vehicles, even when you're hauling more than one, you still have ample space on either side of the vehicles for traversing through the ship. And if you're really good at parking, you could likely scoot the vehicles over just a bit to preserve some of the cargo grid. At the forward end of the cargo bay, we can find 2 side doors complete with mounted machine guns that stow away against the wall while not in use. Adjacent to those doors, we have external cargo storage lockers which can hold up to 750,000 micro SCU of loot, which is helpful for all you little loot goblins and collectors out there. Moving forward from there, we enter an airlock section of the ship that contains 2 jump seats on either side of the hallway, both port and starboard, as well as accessible components lining the hull of the ship, a configuration that is mirrored on both sides. Moving forward just a little bit more, we find ourselves at the lower gunner/co-pilot seat, which has access to 2 size 4 guns and is ideal for helping to clear ground forces when approaching an insertion point. If we go back to the cargo bay and proceed up this ladder, we enter the crew habitation area, which comes complete with a fully equipped bathroom. It also has a bunk room with 2 beds, each with their own personal televisions, and a humble yet adequate food preparation area that comes complete with a small espresso machine. And though bathroom and kitchens may not be functioning features in the game just yet, it is nice to see some creature comforts added into an otherwise military-focused ship. Moving forward, we have on the port side of the hallway what appears to be 2 suit lockers. Conveniently located across the hall on the starboard side, we have a modest gun rack with room for several primary long guns, a specialty weapon such as a railgun or grenade launcher, as well as room up top for several sidearms. Finally, we move forward just a little more as we arrive in the cockpit of the Asgard. Personally, I find Anvil cockpits to be some of the best in the game, and the Asgard is no exception to that. As we sit down, it's difficult not to notice how much information we can glean as we have 4 full MFDs directly in our eye line. Additionally, we have nearly 180 degrees of view from both above and side to side. We even have a small bit of glass below us if we ever cared to look down at our own feet, though I don't see that as being terribly useful. Now let's get down to brass tacks and see how the Asgard performs from a stats perspective. Starting off with DPS, as per usual, I equip attritions as my guns on Urkel.games, and this is just to normalize the DPS discussion, as stock ship loadouts can vary wildly. With that said, the max sustained DPS the Asgard can achieve is 3,430 damage per second, with 2,286 of that being controlled by the pilot, which for a ship that's intended to have crew is very nice, as 66% of the ship's total DPS is controlled by the pilot, meaning it's actually viable as a solo flown ship. It is worth noting that this is not the gun configuration I've been running the PU, as some friends of mine gifted me some NDB-30s, and I have to say, despite losing some DPS on paper, I think that overall, these are the guns to go with, as a much higher percentage of my shots actually land on my target, which is a particular point of contention when facing smaller enemies. When it comes to shields, I swapped in Ramparts, which are the industrial grade A shields, and wound up with a max shield capacity of 24,680, with 851 shield regen per second on this power configuration. Which, I'll be honest, this isn't a ton of shield for a ship with a physical cross-section as big as the Asgard's, especially since its intended use is asset insertion in presumably hostile areas of operation. With that said, in all of my tests it seemed to be somewhat sufficient, but I have to rank the shields as a 5 out of 10. Personally, I would have liked to see at least 2 more shield generators on a ship this size, as well as an additional power plant to accommodate that additional shield, because, as it stands, the Asgard seems a bit power starved. With shields only 80% powered and guns maxed out, we barely have enough power pips available to power all of our required components, which, when engineering comes out, will absolutely translate to us needing to pull some power from shields, meaning we likely won't be able to, from a power perspective, afford to use the strongest shields in the game. Now, normally, I don't spend a whole lot of time, if any, discussing missiles, but for this ship, I feel compelled to. In part, due to the fact that they're so visually apparent on the Asgard, courtesy of a top-mounted size 7 bespoke missile rack that carries 16 size 3 arrestor missiles, which, for some reason, are a lot more fun to use than in other ships, particularly when you fire them off in volleys of 4. Should you manage to land your shots, the missiles on the Asgard can produce up to 40,423 sustained DPS. Now when it comes to hull HP, we're kinda taking a hit here with only 77,000 hull HP, which is only 11,000 more than the Redeemer. The issue being that the Redeemer has 2 more shield generators and a significantly smaller physical cross-section. meaning the Asgard is going to be taking more damage, and it can't really afford to do so. Moving on, as I mentioned previously, the Asgard has 180 SCUs of official cargo grid, which is fantastic for a ship this size. Realistically, it puts it in the competitive realm with ships like the Constellation Taurus from Robert Space Industries, but the Taurus is nearly 50% longer than the Asgard, which is a massive difference in payload per foot of ship in favor of the Asgard. When it comes to fuel, this is where the Asgard gets a little weird, as it has 97.5 SCUs of hydrogen fuel, which is 50% more than the Constellation series, but it only has 1.85 SCUs of quantum fuel, which is only 0.05 SCUs more than the Crusader Intrepid, a starter ship. Which means on long military excursions, the Asgard is going to struggle to keep up with the fleet, as it will likely need to stop for fuel frequently, or it needs to be carried. And currently, there aren't any carriers in the game that can accommodate it. We'll have to wait for either A, the Kraken to be released, or for the rework of the Idris to come into the game, which is stated to have a larger ship hangar, but how much larger is unknown. Unless, of course, CIG can get ships like the Starfarer fully operational. That would change things. Moving on now to flight characteristics, I have to say, whether or not the Asgard feels good to you is a matter of perspective and what you normally drive on a daily basis. Now, I'm 3 weeks into using the Idris as my primary daily driver, hate me if you want, so a pile of rocks would probably feel pretty quick to me. But if you're more inclined to flying fighters and a size 2 or 3 ships, then the Asgard may feel a little disappointing. With that said, I do regularly use the Guardian as well, and the Asgard doesn't feel that much worse. It's definitely larger. You feel the mass as you try to come to a stop or attempt to maneuver around things. But in a straight line, it really isn't bad, with an SCM speed of 203 meters per second. It even has a boosted SCM speed of 425 meters per second, which is pretty good considering the payloads it's intended to carry. And though it isn't the fastest, it definitely feels stable when doing low altitude flying. Because of its high mass in excess of 600,000 kilograms, it doesn't feel twitchy, which is good, but it also doesn't feel sluggish. It just takes some time to come to a stop. I did a very informal test of going from full speed to a dead stop, and it only took about 6 seconds. So though it may not be a fighter, you're still able to prevent yourself from running into things. Now when it comes to pitch, yaw, and roll, your rates are 33, 28, 95 degrees per second respectively, which again, isn't anything to write home about, but it isn't bad. Overall, I have to say, I kind of liked flying the Asgard. It felt very much like a heavy fighter, just a little heavier, which is fine for my style of gameplay, and I'd wager it's good for a lot of people. Now, no ship is perfect, and neither is the Asgard, so let's talk about some of the aspects of it that you should take into consideration before picking one up for your fleet. First, let's talk combat. I took it out for several tests, and the results are about what you'd expect. Personally, I found it pretty easy to work my way through bounties up to high-risk targets, or HRTs. In fact, the HRTs were a little bit easier than the MRTs because the ships were a little bit bigger. In kind, MRTs were a little easier than LRTs and VLRTs, as those ships are just tiny and they kind of run circles around the Asgard. They don't do much damage, of course, but it takes a while to chase those little jerks down. Anyways, the Asgard would likely be a very vulnerable target in a PvP scenario. Even with a gunner, it wouldn't be difficult to outposition the Asgard if you were in a light or medium fighter, because there are just too many blind spots where there are no guns, and you're just incapable of outmaneuvering smaller craft, which is fine, that's to be expected. On top of that, if you were to engage with larger craft, you would have a difficult time keeping up with their damage output. Remember, ships like Akani can put out in excess of 5,400 damage per second, and that's just from the pilot, meaning your shield is gone in just a few seconds if you get caught off guard. So if your plan is to use an Asgard in PvP, then you will likely be relegated to a support role and you will need to be mindful of the damage that you're taking. Again, which is fine, this is not intended to be an offensive force type of ship. Next up, your ship is a little bit power starved. So those stats like shield and DPS are decent right now. In the future, when engineering gets here, you might have some issues keeping everything powered. Or maybe they'll do a power rebalance, who knows. I'm just telling you the situation right now. Next, there are still certain useless features on the Asgard, namely those side door guns. They really don't have much of a field of view, and in order for them to be operated, you have to assign a player to them, which means extra crew slots that would be better utilized flying support craft. Now finally, and I'm not sure why, but Anvil decided to use a ladder instead of stairs in order to access the upper level. Nobody likes ladders in this game, and the Paladin, also from Anvil and also built on the Valkyrie chassis, is designed with stairs to access the upper level, and that is technically a smaller ship with less interior space. So I'm just a hair confused as to why we're still using ladders in this ship configuration. Stairs are so much faster and less prone to accidents. And that's especially true right now because the Asgard has this fun little bug where if you go up the ladder without first ensuring the door above you is open, you die. So not only has CIG decided to use a ladder where stairs would have been a better option, they also decided to use a guillotine in lieu of a functioning partition between crew habitation and storage, which is an interesting choice. So I told you at the beginning of the video that I'd be discussing what makes this one of the better options to use as a daily driver, so let's talk about that. And in order to do that, I'll be laying out 2 key points that led me to that conclusion. First off, versatility in a small package. Though the Asgard isn't necessarily small, it certainly isn't what I would call a large ship. It's comparable in size to the Redeemer, but the options you have with the Asgard, if I were to just list those, are usually only available with much larger vessels. For example, want to go mining? Well, you can carry a golem in the back of it. Want to carry vehicles for ground missions? You can fit several smaller ground vehicles in the garage without a problem. Want medical capabilities? You can slam a Nursa back there and still have room for boxes, which makes it perfect for bunker running with a mobile respawn point. Speaking of boxes, you can carry a considerable amount of cargo in this thing, which means you can engage in the hauling gameplay loop. Want org-based PvEVP? The Asgard is perfect as a support craft in fleet operations, especially when the mission calls for rapid insertion of ground vehicles. Want to engage in scavenger gameplay? Not a problem, you can fit a ton of components back there without an issue. There's just so much you can do with this ship, and you can do it without feeling cumbersome. It's an easy pick up and go ship that gives you access to most of the gameplay loops, and that is just awesome. Second, I want to talk about the vibe and feel of this ship. Now before I get into this, I have to point out, not everyone in Star Citizen is here for min-maxing everything. There are a ton of players that will always choose their subjective favorite over the meta. Now there's nothing wrong with chasing the meta, but for some of us, the fun in this game comes from finding a ship that we enjoy to be in, not just one that performs well. And from where I'm standing, the Asgard fills that role really, really well. From the Anvil aesthetics that are rugged yet clean, to the near perfect cockpit, where players get to enjoy the very satisfying amount of pilot controlled guns you get. And then there's the Hab. It's simple, it's no frills, but it's complete. And it's perfectly reasonable to envision that in the future, when crew persistence is more of a thing, that 2 citizens could spend the majority of their time in an Asgard as they chart their course through the Star Citizen universe. What it boils down to is this. Not everyone likes Constellations, or the Corsair, or ships like the 400i. Not everyone wants to focus on stats, or be aboard giant ships in org operations. That's where this ship comes in. The Asgard offers itself as a completely viable option for the player that wants to spend the majority of their time on one ship, and wants to still be able to experience as much of the game as possible, and more importantly, have fun while doing so. If you enjoyed this video, I'd like to take a moment and ask that you hit that subscribe button as a free way to support our channel's growth. Also, hit the like button to help the YouTube algorithm know that we did a good job. Finally, don't forget to leave a comment with a ship you would like to see reviewed by us here at ForgeCore. As always, thank you all very much for watching, fly safe out there, and I'll see you in the verse. Phoenix out.